So, I mean, having Dickon was obviously very, very cool. I mean, he's such a, I don't know, he's such a child in an adult body. It's just, he's just such a cool guy. Um, and then Linda is someone, like, I'm a big fan of going back to our historical roots, as it were. So I'm a martial arts guy, and for me, it was always really important to be close to the original teachings. And I think that holds true for me anyway in the principles. So the idea of having Linda come on, someone who was there at the beginning, you know, Sid's first student, to me was a really neat thing to have happen, to have come true. And our next ones are actually, we're going to get Jack Pransky on. Hello, Kathy. I've already spoken to Jack. He was my first, I guess, if you will, 3 principles teacher when I stumbled across this a few years back. Oh my goodness. Kathy, are you in a library or is that your home?
That's my library and my home.
That's impressive. I aspire to a library of that size one day. That's pretty cool.
And my husband's going to be joining too. So
fantastic. Yeah, we'll have Jack. Jack's already sort of tentatively lined up. We just got to nail a date down, and then after that, we're going to try. And Kush is going to come and join us with his new book. And I'm going to try and see if I can pull George and Linda out of the hat. I have a very tenuous connection to them through a friend of mine. So we'll see. And then as soon as Bill and Linda's book, Bill Pettit and Linda Pettit's book comes out, we'll be after those guys as well. So I'm going to try to nail down the next 6 or so months for us. So with some new faces, Monique and Vicky and Kathy and husband. Hello, husband. Why don't we, hey, Janelle, why don't we do a quick little introduction? Is that reasonable for everyone? My expectation.
Just jump on every G that comes up.
He could have.
Yeah, totally. Hold on, let's, okay, we're good there. Okay. So now my Zoom abilities are failing on this end. So we want to just roll at the beginning. Lynn, you're in my first square. Do you want to do a quick 2 minutes on your what brings you here, what brought you to the principles, all that kind of fun stuff?
Sure. Yeah. I oh gosh. 2014, I think.
Right.
I was introduced to the 3 principles by Mary Schiller.
Right.
But when I first heard about it, I was actually really skeptical, I have to say. Like, I thought, like, when I guess initially I thought, this is nothing new. You know what I mean? Like, I'd already been on a spiritual journey before I was introduced.
One second, Lynn, 1 sec. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to mute everyone real quick. And then, there. And then as each one of us does our little spiel, I'll unmute you.
Okay.
Carry on, Lynn.
Yeah, so, yeah, when I first found out about it, I was skeptical. I thought, like, this, like, yeah, it was intriguing, but it was also, in my mind, it was nothing new. Like, I'd already had, like, I was already on a spiritual journey. I was practicing Buddhism. I went to meditation classes. This is way before, like, back in 2008, I think I really started my spiritual journey. And, you know, I went to see the Dalai Lama, and I was reading everything about Buddhism, and I was meditating every day. And, you know, I just was soaking up I was on a journey. I was soaking up everything I came across. So when I heard about the principles, it wasn't new to me. And I thought, like, you know, they're all saying this new understanding, or like, you know, this misunderstanding, I guess, is how we were living our life. But so I kind of, like, didn't really delve into it much then. I just kind of, like, no, I don't think this is something for me. And I kind of left it for, like, I don't know, 6 months or so. Wasn't interested, wasn't getting into it, wasn't following people or reading the books or none of that. And I'm not quite sure what happened, but I was drawn back into it again. I think it was probably from listening to Mary, because she used to do a lot of like free webinars and stuff like that. And I think I just started talking or following her more. And I got dragged back into it again. And at the time, I was working with men and women who were recovering from divorce. I was a life coach already. I was like doing that kind of work, supporting them in their divorce recovery. And like some of the women and the men that I was meeting were absolutely devastated, you know, like especially some of the women that I met who their marriage ended due to infidelity, and you know, they're cheated on, they're betrayed, and like they were in a really bad place. And I thought, how can I possibly tell these people in our group support meetings that it's just their thinking? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's only their thought in the moment that is making them feel this way. And I had a really hard time transferring or even being able to talk about it to these people who were like in pain. I just, and even now I still struggle with it. Like, I have to kind of choose my moment kind of thing. But anyway, that's how I got back into it again, and now I'm just sort of like, it's funny because just recently I'm kind of shifting away from it again. Like I was just obsessed with the 3P community and reading all the books and going to the workshops and all of that for a while, and now I'm finding myself exploring other areas too. Not that don't believe in the principles. I understand it's only a description anyway of how we experience our life, but yeah, I'm not like in it 100%. I'm actually doing some other new exploring, and I'm just but still intrigued and still interested in discussions like this.
Right on. Very cool, Lynn. Thank you. Monique, what have you got for us? There.
I'm unmuting myself.
Yeah, awesome. Excellent.
So, hi everybody.
Hello.
I was introduced to the principles kind of by fluke. It was through Nick Bird's program last year, and I didn't really think it would be appropriate for me. It's an anxiety program, but I thought, well, you know, I've got nothing to lose, but it certainly can't touch what I was dealing with, which was chronic PTSD
right.
My whole life from developmental trauma. But I was told to put whatever I had learned, because I had learned a lot. I'm a certified trauma recovery coach, and lots of education on trauma, just to put it aside and to be open to what I was hearing. And I did that, and then I just had so many insights, and very, very quickly, my chronic PTSD symptoms that I was suffering for decades just kind of melted away. So today I am a coach, and I see myself as blending the two together, the understanding, but also looking at how trauma does affect the brain. Lynn, I saw your question about, do we really have to talk about the past? That's a biggie, and I'm sure different people have different answers to that, and I respect everybody's answer. But I personally...
Hold on, Monique, I'm going to stop you there for 1 sec, because I think that's going to be something we're going to discuss.
Okay.
That seems to be of interest to more than just the three of us. Yeah. So let's circle back to that.
Okay. Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah. Are we going to the next person?
Well, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, but basically that's where I am now. That's where I am now.
Right. Wonderful. Awesome, Monique. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Vicki, you're up to bat.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My background is in substance abuse counseling, and I've been doing that since the 90s. And so I've always been interested in different theories and approaches, techniques to dealing with substance abuse with clients, but more deeply with myself, because I have had a few addictions, and such as smoking and drinking, overeating, and so it's been kind of a dual process for me, looking out for what I can use professionally, but then internalizing any of that to see what I might benefit for myself. So I would just have to say I too stumbled upon the 3 Ps just from all of the looking around I do on the internet. And so that was about January 2017. And I just made it like it was my life's mission. As soon as I got off work, it was just 3 Ps, articles, YouTube, anything I could find. I mean, I was just totally engrossed in it. And then in March of 2017, I had a very dramatic insight. And I was just like on cloud 9. It was a personal thing. And so I just couldn't believe how different I felt just the second that that hit me. And so in about 3 weeks, all of a sudden it vanished. And I thought, what the heck? Where is that? And so, of course, I continued to look for it. And then about 2 months later, I had another insight related to that, but it was a little bit different. And I thought, okay, well, I can go with it. And then shortly thereafter, that one disappeared. So I think it was Michael Neal that does the bus stop analogy. And he's like, okay, if you're looking for something, you're going somewhere and you're taking the bus, and you just gotta wait at the bus stop until it comes, your bus comes. And I thought, oh yeah, fine, because I would used to look at things, finish it, and then I say, okay, well, that's done and over. But with the 3 Ps and insights, I'm learning that you got to stay with it. So it is like a daily thing that I look at in some way or another. And so when I came across this book club, because I'm a little bit like Lynn, I'm doing something and then I'm ready to go on to the next thing. It's hard to just make one thing my one and only in life. And so when I came across this book club a couple of days ago, I thought, oh my gosh, that's going to be wonderful. So here I am. And thank you, Michael, for putting this together.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's awesome. Thanks, Vicki. Kathy.
Mm-hmm. So my name's Kathy Conrad, and I just probably came across the principles in August of 2017 when my husband and I were at an EverCoach conference summit, and sat down and listened to Michael Neal. Yeah. And we didn't know who Michael Neal was, and we didn't know who, and he mentioned Sid Banks, and I'm going, how did I not ever hear of this guy Sid Banks? So that night I went and I looked up Michael Neal and I looked up Sid Banks, and I just started researching everything. And then I joined Jamie Smart's Thriving Coaches thing, and I'm part of his Clarity Coach training program now, and his year-long program that he just started. And have also kept up, reading and learning more about it. So I just left my job as a third therapist that I had worked at for 38 years and transitioned to becoming a life coach in June. So that's what I'm doing. And since he's right here, I'll turn it over to Francis.
Hi, Francis. Morning. Good morning. Hello.
Good. The two of us, our stories are very similar. they start back at that workshop, meeting Michael Neal. And I know what happened to me is that I was so caught into what on earth did he do? when he was working with people, to me it was just like I didn't have any reference point in myself to understand what he was doing, but I saw people making such huge shifts and I had no idea what was going on or how it was happening. So I think that was my introduction. I needed to know more about what was going on. Like Kat, my background is also being a therapist. And I basically am still in this process where I find people involved in this community and it just feels so much like I resonate with what they're doing. And it gets to the point that the simpler it is and the more down to earth it is, the more I feel attracted to it. It's taken me out of my head of intellectualizing and helped me to really connect more at a deeper level. And the people who you guys are reading, I'm sure I'm going to be exposed to a community that is even larger than I thought it was. So I'm looking forward to it.
That's awesome. Awesome, Francis. Thank you. Thank you. Arvin, how are you, buddy?
Good. How about you, Michael?
I'm great. I'm good, man.
Hi, guys. I came across the principle in 2013. I randomly, I was at the seminar in Vegas, and there was Ankush talking. And first time, I heard it, it made sense, but I wasn't sure because I didn't believe Ankush was saying something truthful. Because Ankush wasn't, the person that we know now. He was totally different person. So I didn't take it seriously. I started, just for the curiosity, I read the book from Jamie Smart, Clarity, and I still didn't make any sense, so I threw the book away, and that's pretty much it. 2015, I went back to the same event, and this time I saw Ankush again, and he was completely changed. So this is not the same Ankush I saw 2 years before.
Right.
So I was really intrigued, and now my curiosity is to know how did it change so fast and so drastically. Then me and Ankush started talking over the Skype, and he invited me to come to his event, and I got this epiphany about how actually my feelings works. That was my initial insight, kind of like, oh my goodness, my feelings are coming from just me, nothing else. And I realized, if that's the case, there is nothing else I have to worry about as long as I could handle this feeling myself. And I just started exploring, and I couldn't believe how much things have changed for me. It's just, it's like a magic. Like, if I have to put it into words, I would say this is a magic understanding of how life works, and this changes you from inside out drastically. So I'm just, right now I'm very comfortable with who I am, and I try to help out people to get this understanding out. I personally, I'm not seeing myself or doing it this coaching, but I want to get this other people to around me, like, anybody who struggling with life or they are having an issue, I want to show them, because if somebody had shown me at 2013, look, this works, I would have started 2013. But eventually, it had to be, I had to see if somebody else have done this before, so I had to take it myself. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, man. Martine, are you there?
Yes, I am. I
Wow.
just put had problems with my internet, so that's why I put the camera off.
No problem. Good to see you again, Martine.
I came to the 3Ps almost 2 years ago, so I'm fairly new. And since then, I've been probably going a bit overboard. um, reading the books and doing, I've done Clarity with Jamie Smart and his mentoring program with Jamie Smart, all kinds of things with Michael Neal. I went to the 3P school. I did George and Linda Prensky's retreat, and I'm going to Jack Prensky's Peru thing. So I've been like overboard. One day I'll get it. Nice to finally see you, Francis.
Oh, there we go. Cool.
And yeah, so since I heard about the 3Ps, it was not far off from my map of the world. I've been in the helping business in one shape or another for all my life. More recently, as an hypnotist, I work with emotional traumas, mostly because I movement and a bunch of other things. So my map of the world was not that different from the 3P map of the world, in a sense. Except maybe for the oneness that was more an intellectual knowing that they knowing. So slowly it gets from some things went down and some things are still intellectual. So it's a work in progress, I guess.
Cool. Thanks, Martine. I'll keep myself very, very short here. I stumbled across the principles September of 2015. A friend of mine, Arvinino Silas, I think, yeah. A few books appeared on my doorstep out of the blue with a note that said, "You might enjoy this." I think Jack Pransky's, one of Jack's books, and a couple of Michael Neal books, and a Garrett Kramer book. And then I also received a link to Sid Banks's Long Beach lectures. And I started about 5 minutes into the Long Beach lectures, something changed. I was 5 minutes in, I was a blubbering mess of laughter and disbelief. And I like it just, my mind, my world just blew wide open. I would say that I've been a seeker probably since I was about 15, 16 years old when I started reading the Tao Te Ching. I read a lot of Tibetan stuff, a lot of Buddhist stuff. I did some studies of Chinese and Indian philosophy at university, and always always felt close to something, but very much that I was in an intellectual understanding of whatever it was that I thought I understood. And then finding the principles, for some reason, that just flipped a switch for me. And everything just made sense. And maybe more interestingly, what didn't make sense didn't matter anymore, whether it made sense or not. It's like, okay, it doesn't matter if I don't get it. I lost any sense of seeking or searching. And now I'm going to say that's kind of a lie, because as soon as I was introduced, and it seems like a lot of us did the same thing, we pour ourselves into it. So I was obsessed, and I must have turned off. I know I turned off more people than I turned on in the first year after discovering this, because it was like I wanted to shout it from the mountaintop, as it were. And of course, I didn't know anything. I still don't know anything. So it's really neat. There seems to be some similarities in our stories. So that was a long time with introductions, but let's get into the book a little bit. And I know it's a bit of a storybook. It's a little bit different than Dickens' book, which talks a little bit more specifically about the principles, and less so about the story behind the principles. So I think, Lynn, I think yours is a great starting point, given that we've got a few different levels of therapists here. So Lynn, what was do you want to articulate that and just paraphrase it? You find it?
Yeah. Well, I haven't gotten the book, but from memory, I think Linda, when she wrote the book, she had a whole history of, well, I think she was on drugs and she was going to therapy, and she had a mental illness or something like that. And I think she wanted to, I think she was attempting to tell Sid about it, but he never wanted to know. Like, he said, no, I don't want to know what happened in your past. Isn't, what was the quote? The quote was brilliant, actually. I think I've got it written down somewhere. Hang on, over here. Oh yeah, here it is, here. So he said, I don't need to know anything about your past to know everything about you. And that really jumped out at me on the page when I was reading it. I thought, so I think what he was saying there is, it's like your ego, like it's your ego, like it's your story, it's like your sob story, and you're telling it like it's a victim mode, and this is what I perceived it as. Like, he didn't want to hear all of that stuff that most psychologists or psychotherapists listen to. Like they go, traditional psychotherapy is when they look at your past and what you've been through and trying to help you heal through that. I'm not a psychotherapist. I don't know how they work around that, but Sid was basically saying, nope, you don't need to hear any of that to know everything about you. So it was interesting. I guess he was trying to say that we are more than our story. I guess. I don't know. Does anybody else want to?
Yeah, let's if we're comfortable with this, let's unmute ourselves. I think with a small group like this, we can probably manage to kind of not interrupt one another, but add and subtract as we roll along.
I would like to say something like that, because I talked to Jamie about it once, and he says, oh, I haven't done any age regression to cause in 10 years. He says, oh, that's interesting. And I was talking to another person that is a 3P person. He just came out from a coaching call with a very well-known 3P person. And he still had problems. And I ended up doing an age regression on him to the cause. And we went back to 3 years old. Not fixed 3 years old, but no, did something with 3 years old, and the problem was solved. So I'm still in the fence of that the past doesn't exist anymore. But that 3-year-old that felt abandoned, still alive in the person and still running the show.
Yeah, I don't have that educational background to speak to it. I know, well, from what I gleaned from Sid's writings, he was pretty much dismissive of any kind of dragging, I mean, and I'm paraphrasing Sid now, dragging people through the past through all of that pain. And what resonated for me recently was a coaching book I was reading that said, solutions don't care, paraphrasing again, solutions don't care about the problems. And I wonder if that's maybe what Sid was pointing at. And again, I don't know. I've never been trained in regression work or anything like that. So I'm a little bit on the fence with an inclination towards we want to look into we want to look at, no, I was going to say into the future, but we want to look into the now.
Yeah. So, I know. But that person had that problem for many years, and that had coaching for many years. I said, oh, are you? So I said, well, let's try it. And the problem was solved in a few minutes.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So that's why I'm still on the fence. And sometimes, can we go for the quick fix so we can go forward in the future? Or is that just to stay, okay, the past doesn't exist anymore, you're in the now you're safe. And in the now, you're okay.
Kathy, I wanted to say something about that because I was a therapist for 38 years, and that the incidents that occurred to us in the past do have an impact on us when we keep them in the present. Mm. So, Martine, you said that 3-year-old child was still running the show in that person. Mm. It's not what happened when that person was 3 as much as that person is still carrying that 3-year-old. And so that is that in the present moment, that is still impacting, and that could get released in any number of ways, from having that past have an impact on the present. And so that's my understanding of that, and that's one of the things that I do differently as a coach than I did as a therapist. As a therapist, I would have gone back and mined that and processed it and done a number of type of things to let it go and stuff like that. But as a coach, I'm more interested in right now. And if something is impacting somebody right now, then it doesn't necessarily, there can be a whole number of things from the past that might still impact us just as we think about them. They become a thought in a moment. And sometimes a thought in the moment of something wonderful that happened, and sometimes a thought in the moment of something terrible that happened.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Kathy. What just popped in my head was I had a conversation with Jack Pransky around this topic, and he said that what he sort of alluded to was that something can happen in the moment that we, whether we're 3 or 8 or 10 or 46, something occurs and we innocently, so the moment something happens, that moment of action is now gone, and we innocently grab onto it. And Jack was saying that sometimes it's as a measure of protection.
Yeah.
Right. So we take that action, we create, I'm just going to use this terminology, right? We create thinking around it, and that becomes our protection.
Or the goggles of belief is created, and which life is filtered through.
Exactly, Martine. And the thing that Jack spoke about was that it's innocent, it's innocent, it's innocent, it's innocent. The problem then becomes 50 years later or 30 years later. I mean, in my own experience, I saw that happening when I was younger. I would say my family was dysfunctional at best most of the time. And it wasn't until I was in my 40s that I was able to sort of look back and say, well, I actually can't blame. I created that story, and I was the one who maintained that story when things went wrong in day-to-day life. I could always point back and say, well, it was because of that. It was because of. So this idea of each of us carrying our narrative with us, I found really neat to hear sort of from Jack for the first time, and specifically the piece about it being innocent. That's really what cemented my transition into believing in or knowing the truth of the principles. It was the innocence of it. And I don't want to get into the details. Maybe we can another time. But does anyone have any other thoughts on Sid's dismissiveness of the past?
Yeah, I do. Big time. First of all, you're talking to somebody who has had developmental trauma. I mean, I have no before. I grew up in abuse, and that's all I knew. And so at the time, there was no language for what was going on, but I was living with flashbacks and automatic things. Now, what I want to say, and this is the part that's important to know, is that certain changes happen in the brain when you have developmental trauma, when your brain is developing during those developmental years. So I had an automatic response without even, being aware, to fear. It was like instant, and I would get triggered instantly. And a lot of these things are happening like without us even realizing it. Mm-hmm. And I think that had I not done some really important work before I was introduced to the principles, for example, I had a compassionate witness that I worked with. She was a therapist, and we did some work for a year. Now, the actual therapy didn't change anything. I still had the flashbacks. I still had the anxiety. I still had the, all of those kind of symptoms. But what I did have was I had someone for the first time validate my experiences, that I was seen, that I was heard. What happened was awful. I had somebody look me in the eye and really see me, and that did something for me. And so then when I got introduced to the understanding of how we're designed as human beings and how we work and how thought produces, our thinking comes to life in our body, I was able to make the connection when I would get triggered, and that I would see that the flashbacks were actually a memory coming to life in the body. And I wasn't experiencing the past, but I was experiencing the past in the moment as if it was real. And as I started to understand that, of course, everything changed. But had I not, this is again my own personal belief, had I not had the compassionate witness, the understanding, even the education of why did my brain constantly, go to the fear and the hypervigilance and all of that. So there's this combination, I believe, of incorporating both. I still have hypervigilance, even though I have complete understanding of the principles. I don't have chronic anxiety, but if someone walks into the room, I'll jump off my chair up into the sky. But I have accepted that's just, it's not a problem. I'm not broken. I'm not. So that's, had I met Sid before I had any of that understanding, I would not have liked him. I would not have listened. So when I work with my clients today, we do start, I don't dig into the past, but I do validate and I do listen. And then I'm able to show them about how our experiences work and how memories come to life.
That's cool, Monique. Thank you. Arvin, I know you had your hand up there. I'm just going to interject real quick. Monique, I think what's key in there, when you talk about the compassionate witness, is listening. Again, Jack talks about it as being an empty vessel. You don't have an agenda there. You are there to listen, to be there full of compassion. And I think whether we term that as a compassionate witness or a 3P coach, really opening themselves up to just listening without judgment, I think can make such a huge difference for people. Arvin?
My take on the dismissing the past. I used to think it actually has a valid excuse for whatever is happening now. But unfortunately, when I realized it's all was 100% memory. So regardless of really what happened or what I think happened, it has no value beside just my memory. So I could say, hey, this happened to me and I am doing this now because that's the reason. Or I could say that's all my memory. I have no reason to follow through what I want to go for. So it was very simple. I don't know don't have any background in all this therapy stuff, but it was very simple in a sense. I wasn't thinking too much about the past after I understood this. It was just like, oh, I had that happen to me, but that has nothing to do with what I am going to do now or I am going to do tomorrow. It just memory. I could choose it to be impact or I choose it to be let it go. It was like it's once in a while I get few days back I was thinking about something that really happened in the past that really hurt me, and I was sitting down and I'm like, okay, let me write it down what actually happened. And I was writing and writing, then I realized, oh my goodness, I wasn't the same person back as I am now. I am completely different person, and I am still thinking on the back, like in the back of my mind, the past has something to do with what I am doing now. So as soon as I had that, it just kind of that thought of me thinking about the past gone.
Interesting.
I'm like, oh my goodness, it was so simple. Like as soon as I say this is just a memory I'm having, my experience of that pain just vanishes.
Interesting. I think it's important to remember that we all see this a little bit differently, and there's not necessarily one right or one.
Yeah.
If something works for Monique, that's amazing. If it works for Arvin, that's amazing. But just to make sure that we're not trying to do this
No,
convince anyone. Yeah, no.
My experience,
Yeah, totally, Arvin. Arvin's a gentleman. George, how are you?
Hello, Michael. Hello, everyone. I'm very well.
George, you want to give us 2 minutes on who George is and how we found the principles?
Okay, yeah. So my name is George Ebe. I'm Nigerian. I'm in Nigeria. I came across the principles in December of 2017. I read a book called Clarity by Jamie Smart. Mm-hmm. And the theme of the book, you know, something, it just resonated. I just felt there was something there. And I started searching, and I read more books, found some videos online, took a course, you know, I just felt like this is something that I want to learn more about, and I want to share with everyone I know. Incidentally, at the time, I was also taking a coach training course. So it was now a question of, okay, yes, I know I've always wanted to be a coach, but I want to do it from this understanding. Yeah. So after my training, I've started working with a few clients, not so many so far. I'll say I'm still a new coach, but it's getting more interesting. I'm meeting more people, and the fulfillment I get from the impact sharing this has on people is indescribable. So yeah, I'm loving it, and I hope to keep deepening my understanding and helping as many people as I can.
That's awesome, George. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's stellar. So one of the, does anyone else have anything to add in terms of, yeah, Francis, go for it.
Yeah, well, it was reminding me years ago when I was a young therapist, I had a program and I was working primarily with people who were diagnosed with psychosis and extreme depression, anxiety. So they were people who were told by society that they would never be able to function like others, and they would have to deal with this for life. And I don't know what happened to me, but my experience was that when I looked at them, I didn't see that. And so we put a program together, and I just allowed myself to listen, and I saw them as the same as me. I saw them as healthy in a way because I wasn't focusing on what was wrong. And our program blew everybody out of the water because people who were psychotic were actually functioning, were getting jobs, were living on their own, took over the program. And I think that affected everything about my my way of doing therapy, because I realized that so much of my therapy had to do with my ability to just see people for who they were and really listen to them. And that's what appeals to me about the 3 Ps is I think it's just taking it to a deeper level.
That's awesome, Francis. Yeah, it's to me, it speaks to a commonality of people, that we're so much more alike and have so much more that we share with one another than we are different. And the stigmatization of mental illness the way it is today, I don't think is doing anyone any good. And to hear you sort of stumbling on it of your own volition when you were younger in your early days is just beautiful, man. That's just like, it speaks to an innate understanding of wellness for all of us. It's just, that's like, I'm tearing up a little bit. that's just beautiful. This is sort of, go ahead, Martine.
I just want to add to that, and many of you said that Buddhism was a big influence and all those other things. And those in the spiritual realms, or if we can say, when we are light, it has an impact to the other person anyway. And our resonance does something in the resonance of the other person, whether they are aware or not. it does have an impact on them. So our own well-being, whether they get it or not, it does have an impact. You might wake up a year from now, but our own well-being and seeing the other person as not broken does something for the other person.
I agree. We sort of led in this direction. I want to share this. I went to sort of a town hall meeting a few weeks ago with my partner, who is over here just listening. Hi, Julie. And so we went to this talk, and it was about depression and anxiety, and they had some guest speakers up there. And I hope I don't step on toes here, but all they spoke about, all they did is commiserate with one another. One person talked about how depressed they were, and then the next person talked about how depressed they were, and then they talked about this kind of depression and this kind of depression. And it was like they were sharing depression stories. And I was sitting there, and I finally raised my hand. They were doing a Q&A, and I asked the question, do you think you will ever cure your depression? And what would have to happen for you to cure your depression? And there was silence. It was as if I had broken a rule. Like, I mean, the room turned to me and looked at me like I was insane. Like I had somehow, went up and smacked someone. Like it was very, very strange. And I don't understand that. That just popped into my head. If any of you have any insight onto that, because to me, what Sid was doing, what Sid was talking about, what Francis just talked about, what we all kind of believe in, seems so obvious to us now. And for so many people that, in my experience, that are still mired in depression or anxiety or stress or whatever it is, it almost seems like it is who they are. And the idea of being able to step beyond that hasn't crossed their minds yet. It seems unfathomable that they could cure, I'm using the word cure themselves, but become well or see themselves as well. Are there any thoughts there?
Yeah, that reminds me of
oh, that's Vicky.
When, oh, yeah, okay. That reminds me of when several three-piece speakers talk about how people used to think the world was square.
Right.
And then the change came about, no, it's round. Well, the belief of that did not instantly take over the world. It takes a lot to change people on Earth in their ideas of what they've grown up with. And I read a study some years ago about curriculum in schools. And the research showed that it took about 30 years to make a very dramatic change. In some way, curriculum was changed in schools. I mean, that blew my mind. So it's not an instantaneous thing, because groups of people who want to hold on to an idea, they congregate and they strengthen their perspective, which is very hard for another's perspective sometimes to break through. So in my mind, that's kind of what it goes back to.
It's interesting. And what pops into my mind there is, and yet each one of us has kind of said that the change for us just happened. Yeah. that individually the change was spontaneous and instantaneous. Mm-hmm. You know, whether we saw it and then went away from it, came back. I mean, for me, it was night and day. It was like my life in every facet was different. It sounds like that way for Arvin too. So mm-hmm. I wonder if the dilemma there is the intellectualization and trying to teach in a formal structure something that ultimately isn't intellectual, or at least that, I mean, and again, that's how I see that.
You know, what comes to my mind is because I know for myself, because you're living so much in the experience, for me, it was the experience of the trauma, the symptom trauma. So if it was depression, they're feeling the depressive symptoms. If it's anxiety, and because you're physiologically feeling it all day long, this becomes, in a sense, your life. in a sense, you start to say it's your identity because you're experiencing it so much. So when you don't have the understanding of this 3P of how our experiences are coming to life in our body, of course they're going to look at you like, what? Like, what are you saying? You don't understand. We're living this all day long. You know, what do you mean? It's really embedded in there. So I get that, you know, I really, really do. I know I had a lot of resistance because I'm in the trauma community, even from my own program, a lot of resistance. Like, what the heck are you talking about? You know, and I get that. I have empathy for that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and sometimes I work with, that's why I don't like to work with fibromyalgia, because they become fibromyalgia. That's their personality and the secondary benefit they get from it. Like all of a sudden, usually it's repressed anger behind fibromyalgia. And the secondary benefit, it's like, makes it worthwhile for them to stay that way. So it takes more work. But I thought it was funny when you said it takes 30 years. Canada became matrix in 1970, and somehow your people are 2 feet from me, but the school is at 10 kilometers from me, and the something is 6 foot tall but 30 meters long. So things don't change that quick, right?
Yeah.
So I was going to jump in too, because one of the things I focused on as a coach is how we get stuck in the middle of transitions in our life, normal life transitions and things like that, and how we get through that and have a transformation instead. And so one of the things that I've talked a lot about on my Facebook page is the identity that when we're in the middle of a transition, when we change from one thing to another, it's like we have our old identity no longer applies. We end up having to let go of that identity. And I think, Michael, what you were experiencing was people who, because we end up with an identity. I had an identity as a therapist for years. Right. You know, people who are married have an identity as being married as part of a couple, and so we end up developing these images of ourselves, and when we go into a transition or when we go through a transformation, that identity no longer that's no longer there. That's not who we are anymore. So that's my 2 cents worth.
We've got like a dollar's worth of 2 cents now. That's awesome. The time always runs so fast. Let me, one of the questions that I had for the group.
Did we talk about the book at all?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, what book? Well, we were supposed to have the first 7 chapters read. And, you know, what Lynn mentioned, what jumped out at me in the first 7 chapters as well, what stuck with me. I mean, I've read the book a couple of times, but what jumped out was still that idea that Sid was absolutely dismissive of talk about the past. It just didn't matter. So that's what I was going to use as our talking point from today myself. And I think we've been around that nicely. A question that I have is, and Vicky, I think you've addressed it a little bit, was, this seems to work. There's something about this understanding that seems to really ring as a truth once you see it. So why does there still seem to be so much reluctance to adopt it in the therapeutic communities? And maybe 1 or 2 or 3 of the therapists in here could speak to that a little bit. Like, what do you think?
Okay.
I've had an experience of working with a psychiatrist. We started a program together, and after working together for 2 years, about 2 years, and the program grew, and I think it was really successful. He brought me in the office one day, and he said, "You're going to have to leave." And I was totally shocked, because I thought that what we were doing was really having a huge impact, and it was. And so I asked him, "Why do I have to leave?" And he said, "I don't understand what you're doing, and it's too threatening to all the stuff that I learned in school.
Wow.
And so, you know, it's not because of the work you're doing, but it's because of the threat to the way that I was trained.
That's astounding, isn't it? I mean, it's a threat to someone's ego. I was just listening to something from George Pransky the other day, and he speaks of that very same thing, Francis, where when he was first exposed to the principles back in, I can't remember now if it's late 70s or early 80s, and bringing that back into his therapy world, his therapy world, that there was just resistance. And what he ended up sort of saying was, well, or the gist of it to me was that he started saying, well, I feel much better than I did before. I feel happier. I don't remember the terminology that he used, but that it was a threat, that people didn't understand it. And that's, I find it very strange that something that seems so simple and so profoundly helpful to people is still met with ego.
I was just going to say, I think the other piece of it is that my entire training was on working with mental illness, not mental health.
How many of you know doctors Bill and Linda Pettit?
Yeah, I don't know them personally, but I've listened. Yeah.
Bill talks about that with tears in his eyes about how he attended, 25,000 hours of lecturing on mental illness and nothing about mental wellness. And I mean, I'm seeing this thing now as a systemic failure of how we view people that are traumatized or are having issues, and just a catastrophic, I mean, I hate to sound cynical about it, but just catastrophically wrong in our approach to helping people that don't see themselves as well.
If I could say, to me, again, it goes back to what you mentioned, the ego. So, for example, when cars became electronically driven, and if you had a new car, you had to take it to someone who knew how to do the electronic analysis. So for the previous mechanic who didn't know anything about that, they didn't want to know about it, because what they've been doing has been successful. It's worked great. Now we're going, what is this we're going to? It's what? And I'm going to have to get all of these new tools and go back to school. So that kind of a dramatic change, I think, through the ego is a huge stopper to progress. And so for myself, if I had an insight, which for all of us, it would be very different if I told you what it was and you go, okay, so what? But each one of us, for our insights, we're saying it's life-changing, and we could never really go back to what it was before that insight. And so I think it's these factors that keep people from wanting to go into 3P practice. I mean, even on some of the Facebook, they'll say, well, what am I going to talk about when I go into group today? Well, just be yourself, and when something comes up, you'll know how to respond to it. Well, many people, if their life depends on their counseling, they're not going to say, oh yeah, okay, that sounds really great, I'll do that. So I think those are some basic human factors that get in our way of making that kind of a change.
I had some real issues. I'm still not going to say that I feel completely like they're resolved, but I know that my own coaching community, trauma recovery coaching community, when they found out, when I shared that I was now symptom free, and I was going to, not one of them asked me how.
Right.
Not one said that's great. And I was scratching my head saying, don't you want to know how? I mean, this is what you're helping people with. Not one asked me how. What does that say?
It's mind-boggling, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling. Do we have? I mean, I think that's a perfect place to end with that. That was beautiful, Monique. So I'll just say, when we talked about Dickens' book, which is a little bit more 3P oriented, we had these same kind of conversations. We would touch back to the book, and then we would talk. And so, if we're okay with this as a format to allow sort of what comes up to come up and talk about it, this will be beautiful. Are there any last thoughts from anyone? What I'm saying is, there's no script.
Yeah, I was going to say that there's a girl in the 3P community. Her name is Jean Catherine something. I'm not sure of her last name. But she is working with the Beyond Recovery group in the UK with Jacqueline Hollows. And she's gathering data. She's doing this major research on the impact of the principles in the prison system and other areas as well. I'm not sure, but anyway, she this is her job right now. She's on a roll to actually get real data.
Wow.
And that's gonna if it works and she gets it all together, it's gonna open this up even wider now, and it's gonna be more recognized and more acceptable, I think.
Well, and the hilarious thing is, I mean, Jack Pransky did that with his book Modelo, and Roger Mills did that as well. So, I mean, they've been gathering data since the 70s.
Right.
So I'm happy that there's more data coming, but I'm sort of, I'm still stuck in Sid's kind of thought that, if one person wakes up, then another person wakes up, and another person wakes up, and it's going to happen organically. Sorry. I was going upstairs to get this book. I don't know if anyone can see that. Can everyone see that?
No.
It's called Realizing Mental Health.
Okay.
And it's by Roger Mills. And if you can get yourself a copy of it, that book is amazing, because it talks about early data collection around this and studies that were done, and it's brilliant if you can find it. So Jacqueline Hollows, is that Jessie Lynn McDonald? It's not Jessie Lynn that you're talking about, is it?
No. Jacqueline Hollows is in the UK. She's working with Beyond Recovery, I think it's called.
Yes.
Not-for-profit.
I'll have to talk to Jessie Lynn and see. Okay, my apologies. That last little bit with me going to get the book got a little disjointed. Any last comments or thoughts from anyone?
I just am curious, how many here live in Canada? Martine, are you in Montreal? 1, 2, what?
I sound like a Montrealer, and I'm in Ottawa. I was born in Montreal.
So how many are in Canada? Come on. Oh my gosh. I am. 1, 2, 3. Wow. Where are the others from?
We're from Arizona.
Cool.
California.
Nice,
Okay,
Vicky.
great,
Nice.
Great.
Awesome. Well, we're international. Well, and George was here for a little while from Nigeria. That's pretty cool. So listen, are we okay with sort of an unscripted kind of, the next book, whether it's Ankush's or whether it's Jack's, will be a little bit more in the traditional sense of what the 3Ps are about and stories. Whereas this one, I think, lends itself a little bit more to the kind of dialogue that just kind of happened naturally today. So if we're cool with that, I think what we'll do, I believe there are 28 chapters or 26 chapters in Linda's book. And I figure we'll do another 7 or read the whole book. So we'll aim to have chapters 14 complete for next Saturday. And if you have any thoughts, if there's anything that comes to mind, any talking points, add them to the Facebook group. And maybe in time we can grow our little book club community into something that helps people see their lives differently. Cool?
Yeah.
All right, wonderful. Any last thoughts, everyone? Vicky?
I'm just glad I connected to you all, and I'm looking forward to the next meetings that we have. Thank you.
Yeah.
Same here. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, no, thank you, everyone. That's awesome. Francis, thank you for your wisdom there. That's very well. All of you, thank you for your wisdom. That's very cool. And we'll see you. We'll see you next Saturday.
Okay.
Bye bye. Bye everyone. Bye.